Video link, Claudia Webbe.
Thank you, Mr. Hollowburn. It's actually a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I also congratulate the Honourable Member for Slough for securing this hugely important debate. Children and young people have time and time again been failed by this government. The UK is one of the world's richest economies, but 4.3 million children and young people are growing up trapped in poverty. This means that 30% of children, or 9 pupils in every classroom of 30 pupils, must combat hunger and stress before they even arrive at school. For my constituency of Leicester East, nearly half of the children, or almost 1 in every 2 pupils in every school, suffer from poverty. This is a damning indictment of this government's failure to provide a stable foundation for our children and young people to flourish. Poverty has a lasting, damaging impact on the future life chances of children and intensifies systematic inequalities. And this has only worsened during the pandemic. A recent National Education Union member survey found that over half of respondents have seen an increase in child poverty at their school or college since March 2020. The Resolution Foundation predicts that by the next general election, 730,000 more children and young people will be caught in poverty's vicious cycle. Poverty is holding too many children and young people back, limiting their life chances and creating barriers around their access to education. A recent survey found that 3/4 of teachers said that their students had demonstrated fatigue or poor concentration in school as a result of poverty. Shockingly, more than half of surveyed teachers said their students had experienced hunger or ill health because of poverty, whilst more than 1/3 said their students had been bullied as a result. Children accessing free school meals are also 28% less likely to leave school with 5 A stars to C GCSE grades than their peers from wealthier households. The coronavirus pandemic has increased the pressure families on low incomes are facing. 1/5 of UK schools have set up a local food bank since March 2020, with 25% of teachers reporting they personally provide food and snacks to their pupils to ensure they have eaten during the school day. It is vitally important that we recognise also how young people of all ethnicities have repeatedly been failed by this government. That's why I was deeply alarmed by the report published last week by the House of Commons Education Committee that uses selective data to support a preconceived and divisive conclusion, which attempts to pit working class communities against each other. It is true that white, poor children struggle academically, and this is something that requires urgent focus. Yet the Education Committee's decision to attribute this to use of the term white privilege, rather than decades of conservative cuts to the services that children and young people rely on, obscures the reality of how class and race intersect in our education system. One only has to look further to see that racial disparities exist across educational attainment, school discipline and university admissions. Poverty disproportionately impacts children and young people of Black, African, Caribbean and Asian backgrounds, 46% of whom are trapped in poverty. Instead of attempting to create unhelpful divides between children based on their race, we must honestly accept that children from all working class backgrounds have been badly let down by decades of neglect. Because it was not the phrase white privilege that cut youth services by 73% since 2010. That was the government. It was not the phrase white privilege that cut school funding per pupil by 9%. That was the government. It was not the phrase white privilege that closed over 750 youth centres, more than 800 libraries and over 1,000 Sure Start centres. That was this government. It was not the phrase white privilege that scrapped educational maintenance allowance, maintenance grants and trebled tuition fees. That was this government. And it was not the phrase white privilege that announced a catch-up funding package that is a tenth of what its own education advisor said was necessary to make up for the disruption of the coronavirus. That was this government. The government's neglect of children and young people is a generational betrayal. Yet they are now determined to distract from the rampant racial and class inequality that their policies have exacerbated with a trumped-up culture war that is designed to stoke up flames of division. We must oppose this damaging agenda and fight for a future in which all children receive the tools to build a happy and secure life. Thank you, Mr. Chair.